Hey, good morning. In respect for everybody's time on a Monday morning, we'll get this started relatively close to on time. I want to thank you all for making it out on a cold January morning so early, but today really marks a significant milestone in Peoria, and it's one that personally I'm very excited about, and I know a lot of us in this room are happy to commemorate. To set the stage for what we're commemorating, I want to back up just a little bit to 2010. And that's when OSF approached the city about their plans for their downtown campus. And as we just had those discussions with Pat Landis, who at that time was the head of our planning department, having a safe and stable East Bluff was always part of those discussions. But Director Landis was very adamant that any TIF, any participation by the city, would include not only incentives for the business and commercial development, which would provide the funding, but that we would also find a way to help improve the residential neighborhoods of the East Bluff. When the concept of the East Village Grow-Sell TIF was bounced off the residents, I have to admit it was greeted with a fair amount of skepticism. It was about a year before that the Cub Food had closed, and the rationale for another TIF in the East Bluff was very questionable. How would this TIF be different? What's the benefit of this TIF for our neighborhoods? Were questions that we heard over and over again. Well, I personally was very committed to make sure that there would be a benefit for the neighborhood. The city as a whole, the council, the planning department was very determined that we were going to make this TIF different. We began by organizing a Citizens Advisory Committee, and Mitch Mitchell, who has been chairman of that committee since its inception, is here with us today. Mitch, hats off, and thank you for your leadership and all that you've done to help communicate what this TIF is all about. But we began by having stakeholder engagement, by having meetings, and there was a few nights that the weather was very similar to this morning's weather, cold and blustery winter days. But we had people show up at the Glen Oak Community Learning Center night after night, and we took the ideas and the brainstorm ideas that city staff had and that Director Landis had and that we were bouncing around and actually put a plan together that would become the East Village Grow-Sell Residential Rehab Program. Admittedly, and this is something we talked about at the beginning, it was going to take time to see that increment build. 5 years, 6 years, even 7 years wouldn't be out of line for a situation like this. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the reason we're here today is because we're here to tell you there's $250,000 in TIF increment available for the owner-occupied residents of the East Bluff. That is something that we can all be very proud of. Applications have actually been available since January 4th and will continue to be available until February 15th. Briefly, what this is a 50-50 matching program for the owner-occupied residential dwellings. There's up to $15,000 available for qualifying home improvements. Those will primarily be exterior work, but there are allowances also for the mechanicals as well as life safety issues and energy efficiency concerns. The application process is what we would say relatively streamlined, but what government thinks is streamlined and what the residents think is streamlined is often two different things. So we are offering a workshop on Thursday, January 28th at the East Bluff Neighborhood Housing Service House, which is at 1939 North Wisconsin. We'll have staff there from 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 6, 7 o'clock, whatever it takes to get the questions of the residents answered and to help them through the process of actually applying for these grants. Now, the East Village Grow Sale TIF has also been the catalyst for some other significant activity taking place. In 2013, using the TIF boundaries as the guide, LISC was awarded a $3 million grant from the Attorney General's office. LISC clearly is a significant partner with the city in many, many ways, but the partnership that we have formed in the East Bluff, I think, is a textbook for how these partnerships should be formed and how they should operate. I want to give special kudos to Brittany Brown for her leadership at the local LISC office for engaging with us in many ways. So Brittany, thank you, thank you, thank you. This morning, we're excited to have Denise Scott, Executive Vice President of Programs with LISC from their national office. She's here to fill you in on some of the details of this Attorney General grant and what it means in the East Bluff today. Denise, welcome to Peoria.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. Took a while to get here from New York, but I'm happy to be here. Councilman Riggenbach, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the partnership with LISC. I'm joined here today by a couple of our colleagues, Jason Fark and Don Schaefer, who are on the LISC National Board, so I wanted to give them a call out early on. The work that we do nationally is really important to communities across the country. All types of cities benefit from the ability to bring more capital, to focus that capital around the vision that emanates from the community. The vision that comes from someone like Mitch is really important because it really helps us to understand the community and to direct that capital in a way that's going to make a difference in the communities. Since 1980, LISC has invested more than $14 billion in low-income neighborhoods across the country, from places like Duluth to Chicago. We are focused on healthcare and developing schools, affordable housing, economic development, restoring jobs, and mainly the focus is really about redirecting capital and making sure that that capital gets to work in the neighborhoods in a way that it's really going to benefit our communities. It is difficult to even conceive of doing this type of work without a strong partnership. And so the Greater Peoria LISC office really understood early on that we had to lay a groundwork through partnerships with NHS and Mitch and others in order to be able to get this work done. Through a funding partnership and program discussions with the Caterpillar Foundation and State Farm, the Order of St. Francis Health System, United Way, PNC, just to name a few. These are the kinds of corporations and foundations and funders and partners that we've been working with in an effort to advance the programs and the plans for the local community. And specifically in the East Bluff, as the councilman said, we were able to use the National Foreclosure Settlement Funds, the AG money as it's called, to help begin the process of really ramping up the redevelopment of the East Bluff. In the near future, and that this work is underway, in the near future, there's housing now that's in construction, so you'll see new housing, some housing that's being rehabbed, home repair program, and the reuse of vacant land throughout the East Bluff. It's very exciting, and in the coming months, as the winter sort of gets behind us, you'll start to hear a lot more and see more on the housing front. And through its Community Core initiative, LISC is using funds to help improve neighborhood businesses and to complete 120 home improvement projects across the East Bluff. And as I understand it, the Community Core work has been a really exciting initiative and a lot of energy. And it's also helped people who were not funded through that program, but who had, but were interested in redeveloping their homes. So what happens is that, as you said earlier, Councilman, this type of work builds on itself. So a neighbor sees someone painting their house or fixing up their yard, and suddenly they're interested in doing that too. So we're excited about the momentum that this program has offered. And lastly, I just want to say that we're here, we're in business, we're looking forward to investing more millions of dollars more in the Peoria area, and we continue to appreciate your leadership, Councilman, and your partnership. Thank you.
In my other job, we talk a lot about the velocity of money, and I think the Attorney General's office would be very pleased to see the velocity that this $3 million that they have awarded to LISC and the impact it's having throughout the East Bluff. All told, this $3 million will be approaching $9 million in total investment. And I just want to highlight a couple of the other things that aren't related to the gross sale necessarily or the AG grant necessarily, but have all come together and provided some of the velocity that we're seeing in the East Bluff right now. The Wisconsin Avenue Business Corridor Plan is something you've all heard me talk a lot about. It was birthed directly as a result of the residential TIF, and we have a very specific outline of action steps that we hope to accomplish over the next 3 years. If you look at the chart, which this plan didn't come in the form of a binder to the City Council, but came in the form of a poster that you see in businesses throughout the Wisconsin corridor. There's check marks by each of the action steps as they take place, and the number of check marks for 2015 is something that we're all extremely proud of, and we plan on seeing a lot more of those coming in 2016. Habitat for Humanity is another one of our partners that's building 3 new houses this year in the East Bluff. Habitat has been very sensitive to our concerns about making sure that those houses are well suited for the area, and in fact, they're building a 2-story house for the first time. We also have the East Bluff Community Center, which is certainly a beehive of activity and has become the go-to place for many meetings and public gatherings for organizations as well as nonprofits in the East Bluff. East Bluff Build It Up is a group of stakeholders, residents, business owners, nonprofits that come together on a weekly basis just to brainstorm, to make sure everybody's aware of the things that are taking place. That group helped spawn the little free libraries that you see throughout the East Bluff. And it's a great way for kids to be able to get a book, bring a book, borrow a book, but most importantly, keep reading those books. We also have a residential police officer. Officer Carrie Hightower has been a fixture in the neighborhood now for over a year. And then I can't help but mention with a smile on my face the East Bluff Neighborhood Housing Service, EBNHS as we affectionately refer to it. And their executive director, Christina Gamez, is also with us this morning. Under Christina's leadership, the EBNHS went from being kind of a sleepy organization to really being the hub and kind of the go-to place if you need to know how do I apply for that loan? What's this community core all about? Life and health and safety loan program, I've heard about that. Those are all things that have been taking place out of Christina's office. The community core, as Denise referenced, was a $150,000 grant that LISC provided. This was a very targeted part of the East Bluff, but it resulted in over $300,000 in home improvements in that area. Everybody who got a grant was required to put in some sweat equity. People saw their neighbor's lawn getting mowed, and as we like to call it, the ripple effect really took hold, and there's a sense of pride and ownership in that part of the East Bluff that wasn't there a year ago. EBNHS has a health and safety loan program that's been operational for about a year. This is something that's available for people if their furnace conks out or their water heater goes out. They can go to Christina's office and get a no-interest loan. So you see there's a lot of buzz taking place in the East Bluff. And the thing that makes me the most excited as the councilman is this isn't happening because of the great city's leadership. This isn't happening except for the fact that the residents and the stakeholders of the East Bluff are engaged like never before. This truly is a grassroots movement that is taking hold. We couldn't be doing it without the leadership of LISC and the neighborhood associations that Mitch represents and the organizations like Christina is here on behalf of, but it's all together working that's gonna make this a sustainable outcome for the East Bluff. So again, I could go on, but I do have to get back to work. And I wanna make it clear to those people that were skeptical years ago when we talked about this East Village grow cell. There's money available for residential rehab. I want to make it clear for those people who, when they heard about the Attorney General grant and the $3 million that was awarded, scratching their head saying, what's that going to do? There are duplexes built on the East Bluff with residents living in them. Things are changing. Stay tuned. There's more to come. Thank you for being here this morning.
Sam, take a couple questions.
Yes, of course.
All right. When's the program going to affect, first of all?
The applications are available now. The deadline for the initial receipt of them is February 15th, and then it will be reopened depending on the availability of funds.
I'm looking at this potential for similar programs in other parts of the city, other than the south end. I feel left out. Any chance of this happening in other parts of the city?
This was a very targeted pilot that we put together with the East Village Grow Cell TIF. Usually when you talk about a TIF, you think of Cub Food, you think of the commercial developments that we've seen in town. So when we put this TIF together, which has also spawned the Jump Trading Simulation Center and some other development around OSF, we made this a part of that. So depending on the success of this, and early reports are it's good, I think you'll see other developers want to engage neighborhoods because this is clearly a benefit, not just for the business community, but for the residents who make up the heart and soul of our city.
Has there ever been another program like this before?
No.
Okay, so nothing to compare it to. Any idea of number of applicants or applications you're expecting? And with that, there's a lot of rental property there. Landlords eligible too, or just homeowners?
At this point, it is for owner-occupied residences only. We had a very robust discussion on that, and once we see how the initial rollout goes, and to be honest, we don't know if we're going to expect 10 applications or 100 applications. We're really anxious. There's been a lot of phone calls taking place to EBNHS, to the city, so it's kind of wait and see until February 15th. But what was the second part of that? I'm sorry.
Just how many you're expecting, and then landlords?
Oh, landlords, yeah. We agreed, our advisory committee agreed in July, after we see how the initial influx of applications goes, that we'll have the discussion as to whether or not to include landlords in it as well. Clearly, more than 50% of the houses, the residences are not owner-occupied, they're landlord-occupied, so if we can improve that housing stock, it ultimately is a win for us all. So, but we do want to make sure we take care of the owners first.
What happens if the funds run out before all the work's done?
Well, the beauty of it is that there will continually be a replenishment of that. Obviously, it took us 5 years, 6 years to get up to this level, but you continue to see redevelopment happening specifically along Knoxville. The new McDonald's there's a new car wash going in, you know. Those are just kind of hit and miss things, but those are the kind of things that we're looking for. As Wisconsin Avenue Business Corridor takes hold, we hope to see some redevelopment taking place along there. So the more development that we have, the more funds will be available on an ongoing basis.
Tim, I live out by Dunlap, the new place to live. I don't care about the East Bluff. Doesn't bother me. I'm shopping. I don't go there. Just drive down Knoxville. Why should I care as a resident of the city?
I think the reason you should care is because as we help restore this neighborhood to what many of us remember as the the days when it was the strong working class backbone of Peoria, it's gonna require less of those services it's gonna require less police presence. We've seen already a significant drop in crime in the community core neighborhood, which is one of the unintended consequences that you hope for. And as we get this area stabilized, it's gonna make it a more attractive place for people to live. It's gonna increase the property values. We're gonna see some new construction going on as part of the AG grant. So it's gonna help the tax base, which ultimately helps the entire city.
Last thing for me then, let's just bullet point the numbers. I'm a resident there, I'm eligible for how much?
You're eligible for a 50% match up to 30,000. So you could qualify, if you put in 15,000, you would qualify for 15,000.
And how much money is actually available from this program, not from the other? You keep throwing 3 million out there to 9 million, I just want to bullet point that on.
This program has $250,000 available for these specific loans. Yes.
And then where's the other, the 3 million, the 9 million?
And then the 3 million was a grant that List got, which includes the construction of 8 duplexes, which I say are already built, and about 3 of them, Christina, are occupied right now. And that's for a specific population of people with disabilities. And now this year, we're seeing the unveiling of the next phase, which is some new construction and rehab of single-family homes. So we've worked really hard with LISC, and it's gonna allow people up to 150% of the average area income to get into those homes. So the goal is that we'll start to see some of those urban pioneers taking a look at this part of town with a different eye, because there will be some actual new constructed homes there.
Tim, where's the 250,000 coming from? Is it part of the AG grant?
That is TIF increment that's been generated. Anything else? All right, thank you.